We are live. Welcome to the Savage Bloggers Network Hangout on Air, featuring our guest, cartographer, publisher, and fellow Savage Worlds fan, Frank Turfler of Middle Kingdom Adventure and Trading Co., an official Savage Worlds licensee. How's it going, Frank?
It's going well. Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
me on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for coming on, man. This is exciting.
This is super exciting. Following the stuff that you've been doing, I've got some particular interests in the things that you have been doing recently. So I'm hoping that comes up tonight. Full disclosure, though, Frank is a Patreon supporter, and for that, obviously, thanks, Frank. But to be clear, that's not why we have you here. There is not a Patreon level that gets your stuff mentioned on our show or gets you hangouts.
Yeah, Frank did not threaten to pull his funding.
Could be a new one.
Right.
Maybe there could be a new one.
Hey, publishers.
No, I don't want anybody. I don't want anybody just throwing money at us
That's true.
to get us to talk about their stuff. I don't know
we
about that.
We try to give equal access to all. So yeah.
I've never been comfortable with that, and over the years, I'll be honest, it's been offered, but no.
Yeah. Buying your way in is not going to be a thing with us.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
yes, but thank you again though for coming on here. I'd like to kind of get into, Frank, if you're willing, sort of the history of the products that you've done, sort of how you got into these things. Recently, people have kind of known you for things like Savage Dungeons and some of the virtual, the maps and the VTT stuff, virtual tabletop terrain and such. But you started a while ago with stock art, correct?
Well, hold on.
Yeah,
I thought this was going to be an hour of me picking his brain about Savage Dungeon.
Well, we're going to get there, I promise, Ron. We're going to get there. We will obsess over that endlessly when the time comes, I promise you.
Fine.
It's pretty empty up there, so I mean, you may not have much to pick.
Right.
Nice.
Noted. So stock art. What inspired you with stock art, and how'd you get into that?
I mean, I've always been, probably since I could hold a pencil, I've been drawing. So, and then I went to school for art and design, and I don't know. I thought I was going to be the next Larry Elmore, right? And that didn't happen. It didn't really work out that way.
Right.
What's that?
I said, aren't you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I did, and I actually sent a portfolio into TSR, and I never heard from them. So,
oh man.
Yeah. But from what I can tell,
who needs them?
That probably worked out for the better.
Right.
I mean, that was in the '90s, so it probably worked out for the better.
In hindsight, yeah, I think you fared well on that one. Good call on not following up. Yeah.
But so I don't know. I started just doodling stuff, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to throw this out for sale and see who wants it. And I think the very first thing I put out there is like this lizard man, the two lizard men in a dungeon, and it was taken directly from the campaign that I was running at the time, and just for fun, I was doodling this stuff, and so yeah, I mean, I from that point I've been doing some illustration for different adventures and stuff like that. A lot of D&D stuff, a lot of OSR writers, because it's an easy kind of style, right? It's a pen and ink, and so that's generally what's associated with those types of games.
So your focus was more on like the black and white line art approach.
Yeah. Quite honestly, I was never very good with color. So I mean, I do black and white line art or shaded pencil or something like that. Of course, now everything's digital. I do everything on a tablet. So
nice, very nice.
And I mean, I do work in color as well now, but when I started, it was just I'm just doing stuff quickly, just to see what's out there, what people want. I'm actually a little behind right now on a Kickstarter for a friend that that he's finishing up. So we're that artwork will be out there soon.
How
Nice.
often do you get stuck drawing everybody's characters at the table?
I was really smart and didn't let anybody at the table know that I was really good at drawing stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that said, before the show, you and I were talking about how you started gaming with your kids and such not too long ago. Do you draw their characters at least?
I will draw their my daughter is adamant that I give her a character, and I usually go one step further. I'll make a paper mini for everybody's character.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That is
so,
awesome.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say I was waiting for you to say no. I haven't told them I know anything about art yet.
They're the last. They're going to be so picky. I don't want to. Yeah. I
Yeah.
get that. So when
That's
you
awesome.
started with the stock art, is that when Middle Kingdom Adventure and Trading Company was started as a sort of as a label? Or,
Yeah, I needed some way to operate, and so I thought, I'll start this. I'll just pick a name, and I was
Right.
looking for something that had this sort of importer exporter
Yeah.
name to it.
That's
So,
kind of what
you know,
I imagine as a sort of like trading in the Far East kind of sort of vibe.
Yeah. Yeah,
so that's-
and the first couple of illustrations, I had little stories like this one was a sketch that was drawn by our correspondent, out in the field and stuff like that. So,
Oh, neat.
so
Very cool.
giving it that idea that somebody is in this other realm, actually seeking out these artifacts and bringing them back to you.
Right. Oh, that's cool. I like that. That's unique. That's different. Yeah.
I try.
That reminds me a little bit of Lacey O'Malley from the Deadlands books, who is the Tombstone Epitaph writer.
Oh,
that
right. I was like, why does that name sound familiar? Yeah.
Puts in all the stories that no one believes.
That's awesome. So speaking of things, journeying across lands, let's get into cartography, right? Because that was sort of like your next thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean that kind of it developed probably simultaneously because here I was, I hadn't gamed for 20 years and I'm thrown into it, and there's all kinds of new technology from the early 90s. So I was actually, it started with a regular game, my gaming group, which was a couple of friends and my daughter, and we were playing. I had the book for one of the Encounters series, the D&D Encounters, but I didn't have the maps.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so because it was very tactile and I didn't. I mean, even back in the day, I had the big vinyl Chessex mat that we would draw on all the time, and we didn't really count squares, but it was great having that for sort of reference of where you were and where the other stuff in the room was and stuff like that. But I didn't really think about crafting tiles and stuff like that back then. But I really had no choice, and I thought, well, I'm going to sort of craft these things. I found on YouTube DM Scotty, who was
Right.
doing custom tiles with cardboard and stuff you find basically laying around your house. I mean, it was, if I could spend less than nothing for it, then that was a good day. And so so I just started like making these types of things.
Nice.
And they were just all custom, and I got it started to get beyond me to try and keep up with. Every time we would have a new encounter area, I would have to spend the week or 2 weeks, whatever the time in between games was, to come up with this thing. And I'm like, there's got to be an easier way. And I saw somebody was printing out some. I think they were like Fat Dragon Games maps and cutting them up and pasting them onto cardboard. And I thought, well, I could do that. In fact, I could make those. I know
Nice.
Photoshop pretty well.
Yeah, I think I remember something about that where they're printing in Fat Dragon Games is they do the paper terrain stuff, but also the tiles and stuff as well, right?
Yeah. The like
Yeah.
cardboard or
Mm-hmm.
papercraft buildings and
Papercraft,
stuff
right?
like that. Yeah. And
That's
now
right.
he's into 3D printer stuff and stuff like
Yeah,
that. But
makes me want to buy a 3D printer.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So then I just started, cutting this stuff out, pasting it on foam core. You get this foam core cheap, and it started there, and then I came across this other guy who was doing walls, but he was doing them a little bit differently. Where here, I think I've got some stuff here, where instead of being sort of flat, there's a bit more, relief to them.
Right.
So I mean, it was real easy to kind of throw that stuff together, and I mean, it just gets, again, it gets away from you. You just start,
Right.
one thing leads to another idea, leads to another idea. So I just said, I'm making this stuff for myself. I might as well share it with everybody else. And if you feel like, throwing, a penny in the tip jar, here's the hat.
Right.
So then that led me to starting the Patreon. And then, after a while, this stuff all ends up on Drive Through RPG or RPG Now.
Right.
But there's at least a month or more between the release on Patreon and when it gets to there. So
Right. So you give priority to.
yeah, I mean there's exclusivity, and there's stuff that the Patreon backers will get that will never see the light of day. There's just
Nice. Yeah. So
there's no place for it. So
that's cool. That's really cool. So when you got into the cartography, was it what was the scope of the maps? Were they just like dungeon tile type things, or did you go broader? What were the what was the scope?
they kind of, I mean, if they started off as just sort of I was mimicking Dwarven Forge, so I was looking to see, what did they have? The corners and open tiles and hallways and stuff like that. So I was just making whole sets of just those that you just cut them up and lay them down in as individual tiles. And I still do that because I think that's convenient to have those things.
That's that's really. There's a distinct advantage to that too, because with Dwarven Forge you have to pay per piece. So if you want to have so many turns and so many hallways and so on,
stuff is so expensive.
And it's so expensive, right? Like it's insane. But with the this is like a print on demand kind of thing. Like you print at home.
Yeah.
If I need 3 corners, I can print 3 corners. And that's really. I mean, and that's how most of these tile type products are. But I think what also makes yours unique is that you have that 2.5D. Tile set, system that I think is really cool.
I would like to hear more about 2.5D.
Yes, yeah, Phil.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into that because I think that's a really unique thing, at least as far products that I've seen. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially. I wish I would have brought some, parts, but I mean, it's basically.
Oh, jeez, you came unprepared, man. Oh.
Yeah, well, I mean,
We're just gonna boot you from the show now.
Why would I want to show parts?
Oh yeah, there you go. All right, you redeemed yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea is that I'm only going to create as much as I can stand or need, right? So I mean, the basic 2.5D would be a flat tile with a wall.
Right.
And so I came across this guy, Wylock, on YouTube, who's, again, a lot of these guys, they're making stuff that's, they're painting it, and I love painting this stuff, but it's so time consuming.
I don't have that time.
I'd rather just print it up and stick it down. I mean, it still takes a little bit of time, but it's, if you're somebody who's not a good painter, you still get a good result.
Right.
And like you said, you want more, you just print them up. You don't have to worry about, buying more. But then I also came up with some elevations. I don't know if I can, so I mean, this just kind of clips on. If I can get it to, there we go. Right. So there you go. You've got this this clip-on elevation, right? And the idea then is also like I thought I had some minis here somewhere, but
Kind of
basically-
reminds me of a movie set.
Yeah, and there's probably some inspiration from movies for me in that, because I mean that's part of my day job. So, but yeah, it's like theater or movies, right? And so because the low profile walls, you can get in from any part of the table.
Yeah, there's a usability factor there that I really
Yeah.
like. You know, you don't have to reach over or reach around like the walls. Even just being able to see what's going on. That's, yeah. I mean, I think that's brilliant. And I think
By
that
the way, folks, that's 75% of what you need to do to get Christian to invite you on this is to do something that causes him to say the word usability.
usability. That's it.
That's
That's all it takes.
that's all it takes to get on this show.
That's right.
Well, I mean, that's definitely part of my philosophy with these is, they've got to be, I've got to be able to use them, and it can't take me forever to put it together. It can't take me forever to set it up on the table.
Right.
Those are gorgeous.
I game with a 9-year-old, so, his patience doesn't last long. So, I mean, and that's my test. If it passes the inkling test, then it goes forward,
That's
I mean,
your,
if you,
My daughter's 12, and I haven't seen an improvement, Frank. Just FYI.
well,
It's not going to get better, buddy.
a lot, he behaves a little bit better than some of the people I work with, so.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and then if you want to go a little bit further, you can try and get this in here. You can
Little furniture pieces, set
you can
pieces.
put in different pieces. And part of the philosophy of making it simple and usable is I don't want to have to cut any more than I have to. So even in furniture, this thing is all based on standard foam core sizes that I just cut and then paste the stuff over top of it. I mean, it's a skin, right? I mean,
So that's basically wrapped on the foam core?
Yeah. This is just I built it out of foam core and then wrapped it.
Wow.
That's okay. I guess I'm going to be a new consumer of your stuff, man.
I'm gonna have to start doing videos on how I put some of this stuff together, because I mean, I think it's pretty intuitive. I mean, this is just some patterns that I had printed out and then put together to make a fireplace.
I'll be honest, man. If you created a YouTube channel for your company and you did demonstrations on assembling these things, I think that would do. I think that would help. Yeah. And you can even put those on the product pages and drive through RPG. And
Yeah,
stuff.
it's just fine. It's finding the time. What's funny is David Scott always talks about how I have videos for all of the products and I show you how to put them together, and I think I have maybe 2 videos, maybe 3.
Right. He's got all these videos. It's the whole library.
I love them. It's great.
Right.
But,
Well, thank you, David Scott, for championing. Yeah.
But, so again, it's like you need a sewer. Here we go. We're draining in.
So what's also compelling about this is that I have a philosophy that if I spend way more time prepping for something and building these things than I do like on the game itself, to me it's not worth it. But this sounds like it's really relatively fast and easy compared to say painting and things of that sort.
I think it depends on the level of the game that you're doing. It depends. If you're doing a con level game, then something like this is probably right there in the sweet spot.
Yeah. It's portable,
home game,
lightweight.
Home game you could easily get over. Spend way too much time, but that's based on your own, whatever you want to do with it. But I mean, you can be as simple as just putting it on a foam core and not putting the walls on. Or you don't have to build the furniture. You don't have to put the walls on. Although putting walls on makes all the difference, and it really doesn't take that much more effort.
I think one of my favorite pieces I saw was the spiral staircase, where it kind of goes up a couple levels. I think.
Yeah, I don't have that on hand, but I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, that one looks.
Do any of those have squares on them? I
just started putting squares on them. I was kind of on the fence. I don't use squares often, but it was after I'd listened to the Simply Savage, where you guys were talking about who were you talking? You were talking to
Sean Fannin.
To Sean Fannin.
Yeah.
Well, by the way,
grids versus no grids.
I'm here to answer all of your riffs questions tonight.
That's really why we have you on the show, because of riffs. As if nobody's sick of hearing about riffs. That was for you, David Scott, if you're listening, because I know
I would be the last person to answer any questions about riffs. I was just introduced to riffs, so.
Yeah, I know. I know very little about riffs, but I think Ron knows quite a bit about it. So.
I know a medium amount of things about riffs.
You know what we should do? We should get Sean Fannin on to talk about riffs. I think he might have a word or two.
How
might have a few words.
I think I'm going to see the phrase Savage Riffs plenty in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Starting tomorrow.
I think we'll be covered.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm backing it, man.
I'm not going to lie. I'm even questioning whether or not we should mention on SBN News.
I'm right.
Is it necessary?
Right. Is it necessary?
I don't think it's going to be necessary for us. Like our 12 listeners are not going to make a dent in that Kickstarter.
Right.
Oh my God!
So,
blow up.
The Wild Die, their interview with Sean was really enlightening, especially from my perspective, because not knowing anything really about riffs. I mean, I thought that was really good. But I think where you're going to see the explosion is in the riffs players who don't know that there's.
Right.
I mean, and they brought that on. I mean, they brought that up on the show as well.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So, all right. So we talked about stock art maps, 2.5D tiles, which are really cool. You also do virtual tabletop maps as well.
I do. And, I mean, kind of going back to the original question that was, when I listened to Sean on the show, and he talked about how, he finds it very convenient having the grid.
Oh, the grids. Right, yeah.
Totally.
I immediately said, well, all right, I'm going to, I was doing it off and on if it's that big of a deal, and I kind of posed the question to multiple communities and said, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of came back as sort of half and half, and I said, well, it's not that much harder to put it on.
It's just a layer.
Yep. So to answer the question, going forward, all of them will have the option for grids.
Are you considering updating the older files to do layers, or?
I'm considering it, but I have such a backlog of stuff, like personal and everything else, that I may or may not get to. What I probably will do is I'll look at what the most popular ones are first. And the nice thing is that the people who have already purchased those on One Bookshelf will get the updates automatically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And of course, patrons will also end up getting updates as part of just being a patron. So.
Right. You can also just write a set of instructions on how somebody can take a ruler and
you could do that. You could
draw lines.
Well, for the VTT, you just project onto. I know these guys that use these overhead projectors for their maps.
Yeah.
Icons. You just project onto a battle mat.
Right. There you go.
And I don't use VTTs, so I don't know too much about what people, how people are using them.
Right.
Right.
But I know enough about them to know that you don't need the grid on the artwork, because you can put the grid on it in the VTT.
The app usually has the overlay
That's right.
for you. Right. I was gonna say that, but you already said it, so I got nothing to say.
There you go.
One of the things I was trying to do with VTTs early on, I was working with Eric Lamoureux about he wanted to do a sort of take the tiles, the individual 4x4s and 2x2s, and just basically plop them down on the screen in Fantasy Grounds as like you would a token.
Right. Right.
And
nice.
I don't know if they ever updated Fantasy Grounds to the point to be able to do that, but I know we were having problems with like sizing, because it wanted to keep a specific proportion size and so we were playing. Okay, well, what's the pixel length? What's the pixel height? Can we change it? What's the resolution? 72, 150, and so I don't remember that we ever came up with a good solution for that.
I remember back with when I used to use Map Tool, it had the ability to do a background layer, and you could snap it to the grid. So one, you can scale the art whatever size you want,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can have it snap to the grid. And so some people did do actually one of the guys. This is kind of cool actually. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Fantastic Maps. He did the Game of Thrones Westeros maps, right? The whole the official Game of Thrones cartography book that came out. I'm trying to remember his name. Jonathan Roberts. And back then, he actually did a series of tiles for Map Tool that people could drop on, and it would snap to the grid, and you can drop as many as you need of whatever particular type of tile that you wanted. And it was a really cool way of just laying out a whole dungeon quickly and easily. So yeah, if you're willing and able, I think there might be a market there.
They're
cool.
out there, so.
Yeah. So cool.
Well, let's talk about Heart of Darkness, your adventure.
Well, and to be clear, that's an adventure framework. I think is the framing that you gave. So
that was the term that I coined. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about Heart of Darkness and what adventure framework means.
Sort of like, buzzwords.
Yeah.
It's just kind of part of me and
it's marketing. It's good marketing.
Yeah. Well, you spend enough time in that area of the world, you start to talk like them too.
Yeah.
But it's essentially that started. It started as a White Star adventure. I don't know why I was inspired when James Spahn came out with his White Star for the White Box Swords and Wizardry compatible game, and there was all this buzz, and I said, "Wow, I've got this interesting idea," and it was really. I guess there's some irony in the fact that Curse of Strahd is the new D&D adventure series, but it was sort of a sci-fi homage to Ravenloft for me.
Oh, nice.
Because to me, I wanted to do something sci-fi, and I loved this idea of this sort of very true romance, not Fabio on the cover of a book romance.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No heaving bosoms.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we have plenty of that. But yeah, so the idea was that I wanted to do this sort of Dracula story, but a sci-fi thing. So that was the inspiration for that, and at the same time, I was just picking up Savage Worlds. I had been reading Savage Worlds for about a year. I had played I think one or two games. I had played Deadlands, which was awesome because as me being sort of the old school style gamer, my character died at the end. So I mean, I was like all about. I mean, and he went out in a blaze of glory too. So
nice.
So not again. I don't want to go bring up any of the Savage Rift stuff, but.
Ron, were you asking something? Because your mic is muted.
No, I was not.
Okay.
I'm muting the mic because I have a son that is 3 that apparently does not want to go in the bath right now.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So I mean, it's sort of a sci-fi Ravenloft, if you will. I mean, I don't know that it's Ravenloft, but there's some elements there. The big bad sort of being a vampire-like entity, if you will.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And I mean, and the other part of it, why I called it an adventure framework, is I really wanted it to be something that you could run on the fly, or that you could improv, right? So you have a framework that you can work from that sort of gives you hints and tips and stuff that, you know, I really don't know too many people that love reading text right off of the page.
Right.
So all, you know, I wrote that much the same way that I write my notes for any adventure that I'm going to be playing or writing. And so the idea was that you know, that you could look at a page, you could get all the information you needed off of 1 or 2 pages. Now I ended up going over in a couple of spots, but that it had to be done. But you know, the idea and the events that you can choose from, there's sort of a pick list, and the events are, you know, escalating. So if you wanted to be easy, you pick from the top of the list. You want to be hard, you go to the bottom of the list. And a lot of the inspiration, as a lot of the stuff that I'm doing these days, is coming from a lot of the newer games where I read rules for games like most people would read fiction.
Right.
I don't know anyone like that.
No.
So I just picked, you know, Dungeon World was one of the hot buttons for me. I'm like looking at this going, wow, this is great. This is just like playing jazz. It's all improv, but the notes are right here. All I got to do is kind of glance down and go, oh, this is what's going on, and you know, an improv, rather than, you know, I'll get caught. There'll be an infinite loop going on in my head where I don't know where to go next. But if I can look down at my notes and say, oh, this happens.
Right.
You know,
oh, E flat. You know. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So the focus is on elements of the story, less than a script, more on just sort of these are the key elements that you can incorporate in the adventure. Yeah,
and you know, nothing has to happen in any particular order.
Right.
There's, you know, and there's sort of an overall. It's interesting because there's a lot of talk, of course, in the last month or so about plot point campaigns.
Right.
And there was definitely some inspiration from plot point campaigns in that as well, even though the whole thing happens in one location as opposed to a plot point campaign that is multiple locations.
Right.
So again, this is the idea, is sort of mixing the old school dynamic of exploring a space with sort of more modern ideas of here's the story frame that happens around the you know, that's happening around what you're doing, and just fit it in where the characters are at, as opposed to fitting the characters into the story.
So for those who aren't familiar with Heart of Darkness, how long of an adventure? Like, is this like a one-night session? Is it like multiple sessions? Is it a full campaign?
It could be played in one night. I know, again, I had Eric was kind enough to play test. Eric Lamoureux helped me out a lot with the conversion to Savage Worlds. I learned a lot about Savage Worlds during that process. I mean, if you want to understand rules of a system, go write an adventure for that system. Mm-hmm. And so Eric was nice enough to play test it. Another friend of mine, Victor Diaz, also play tested it for me. Victor went and played it several times with the same group, and just changed the setting up, and was able to run it sort of different. They never knew. There was enough that he was able to run it 3 or 4 times, and using different information each time and changing, you know, the basics of the setting. I think he wrote it. He did a post-apocalyptic version. He did some, you know, like just way different genres each time. And
now that's jazz.
Yeah.
Right there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he's really good at it. So I mean, I think, you know, it's a testament to his ability to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I would be curious to see if somebody else who isn't as good as he is to be able to do that same thing. And
Christian, get on it, man.
Me. No pressure. Right.
No, I said not as good as him.
Maybe if I send a version to Carl, he'll run it at a con for me.
with like
Nice.
Ghostbusters, with the
Exactly.
Scooby-Doo gang,
Yeah.
Or Jarrett can run a My Little Pony version. There you go.
There you go.
or a post-apocalyptic zombie version
With ponies.
with ponies. There you go.
And flying sharks.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think that was the idea. I wanted to be able to run it in one night, but I think really it's easily a two session game. Eric ran it in one session, and his feedback was, yeah, it went well, but I think it would have been even better if we ran it over one or two, maybe even three different games.
So okay, that answers my next question, which was could somebody use this? Could they sort of truncate it enough for like a con game? Like, would it be fitting for that?
For sure. I mean, you would have to know that that's what you were doing beforehand, because I think when Eric ran it, he ran it to the just sort of on the fly,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, he was familiar with it because he had already done all the conversions. So I mean, he had a lot of information to work with. But I think you could easily do it in a 4-hour sitting on game. It may not be as robust. You may not get to everything, but I think most adventures are written in a way that you may not get to everything.
Right. Right.
And you can definitely get to the end.
You're going to pick some highlights for something like a con game anyway. Like, what are the key things you want to focus on, right?
Yeah.
So, very cool.
I mean,
That's awesome.
I left a lot out. I have like a whole sort of area of space that you could, like, I was going to put it in as extra, like the location and the asteroid field. There's a little bit of backstory in there that people can actually use to build a world if they needed to.
So yeah, that raises the question then. Do you plan to expand on that?
I have at least one other idea, maybe two, in that universe that I probably will expand on. It's just finding time.
Right. Right.
It's
because you're really busy with things like the all-important Savage Dungeons.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that eats up everything that isn't my wife's time.
As it should.
This stuff sounds awesome, but yeah, concentrate on the Savage Dungeons. I don't need lines on my maps. I don't need lines on my maps. My maps are fine.
I want that physical book in my hand, though.
So is that going to be the cover?
I'm hoping that it's gonna look something like that. Yeah. I would love to be able to get it to a point where it has.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna, who could help you with that? There's this guy I know named Carl Kiesler. That dude is amazing.
It definitely has crossed my mind.
Yeah.
So
if you're listening, Carl, I'll tag you in the post after this. So
I have these. I mean, I always think big, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm going, anything that you've seen me produce that I've taken a picture of, there's an idea there, right? So having bennies that are specifically themed to that game, right? I really would love to be able to find, and I know I posted about this. I would love to be able to find somebody who's manufacturing those cheap old dice that chip off and have rounded corners, because those would either be great to include as a wild die or as some other die, or even use them as bennies.
Right. That's so meta. Use this die, but don't use it as a die. Use it as a token for your bennies. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so yeah, I would love to be able to do sort of a leather bound or even a faux leather version of the cover for that.
I smell a Kickstarter.
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, if that would be the only way to be able to do it.
Right.
Would be to have that. So.
Right. So Ron, I'm going to unleash you to ask whatever questions you want about Savage Dungeons.
All right. Well, I'll start out with a kind of the broad question for people that have not been following along at home. I call those people misguided.
Those
Tell us-
poor lost souls.
Tell us about Savage Dungeons. Tell us about your concept, where it came from, that sort of thing.
So this is the part of the show where I blush, right? And then
I do that to people,
yeah. So, but the basic concept is that I spend a lot of time playing gaming at home with he'll be 9-year-old son, and all of my kids have played pretty much basic D&D for the entire time that they've been playing. So they didn't know Savage Worlds. So I was playing with this idea of how do I introduce Savage Worlds to my 8-year-old. And so I started with simplifying the character sheet, which I came up with this idea and I put it out to the community, which was awesome because I got so much great feedback. I mean, that's one of the greatest things about Savage Worlds is the community, because you get feedback. You don't get sort of whacked in the head for asking a question. You get really good feedback.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I fell in love with the Savage Worlds community for.
So so I said, here's this idea that I'm working with, and I got all this. Hey, could you do this? Could you do that? Could you do that? And I didn't. I mean, I'd be honest. I didn't take everybody's feedback because it would be impossible. And for the most part, I was just really creating something for home use. And if other people liked it and I could customize it in a general way that people were able to use it, then awesome. There it is. Go for it. And at the time, I released it as a fan piece because there's one, I wasn't a licensee, and there's artwork that is not mine, right? So there was no way I was going to put it out there as anything else but, hey, this is cobbled together from used parts. All I did was change the names, but it worked.
No, going back to the stock art thing that you used to do, and that your inspiration, your sort of modeling for the artwork that you did was based on that classic line art approach.
Yeah.
You're equipped to do your own art for it.
My final versions will probably have a significant amount of my artwork, but as I've said before, it's sort of like the mechanic who never works on his own car. You're busy doing everybody else's stuff, so when it comes time to do your stuff, it's like, oh, I'm spent. I can't even think about this right now.
Right, fair enough.
It was easier to just slap something else together and say, here you go.
Right, but when push comes to shove, if you decide to pursue this as a fully Savage Worlds licensed product, you have those resources.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can definitely. I mean, all the art for Heart of Darkness is mine. So
nice.
So I mean, I did the layout, I did the art. So yeah, the capability is definitely there. Well, I mean, just the mock-up of the Savage Worlds, or the Savage Dungeons book was mine, right?
So just as a little bit of incentive, Perry Chalmers has commented, "Take my money for Savage Dungeons." So I'm just throwing that out there.
And it's comments like that keep me going. So thank you very much.
Yeah, awesome, Perry. Yeah.
So I mean, the idea was to be able to take what was familiar to the people that I was playing with and be able to just sort of point them in that direction and say, well, where armor class is? Well, it's not armor class. It's now called this, right? Or it's like this. And I got to be careful because I know people get a little bit, certain people they like order, and that's good. I like order too. I just like somebody else to do the ordering. So, but so to be able to make something that was familiar, okay, well, you're used to seeing this character sheet, and normally when somebody takes a swing at you, this is where you look on that character sheet to see if they hit you. Well, that's the same thing. It's just called something different in Savage Worlds.
Right, but you have the same reference point visually in terms of the orientation on the sheet. Yeah.
Right. You should get together with Level 27 Geek. Have you
Okay.
seen his
I
stuff?
have not, no, but I will.
He did a whole thing on hex crawling in Savage Worlds.
Oh, I think okay. So I'm not familiar with the name, but I am familiar with the
Yeah.
concept. So I probably have read something.
He actually put together a rule set for hex crawling, and
Cool.
it just sounds like it might be a cool thing to kind of include in that sort of a project. I
Yeah,
know for him it's a fan endeavor, but
I know that the hardest part I think in doing this project is one. It starts out as a labor of love because once I was able to sort of get my son past the initial hurdle of trying a different system, um, and and he was able to roll a wild die and have dice ace. It was like that's all he wants to play now.
Yeah, that's when lightning strikes, and then in Savage Worlds, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So so but he still wants to play in the same style. If you, I don't know if style is the right word, but he's a dungeon crawler. He enjoys,
milieu.
yeah, he wants to just go in and beat up monsters, right, and
Yeah.
take
their
their
stuff,
treasure.
right? Yeah,
So I said, fine, we'll just do it with Savage Worlds instead. And I grabbed some old adventures and just started trying to convert stuff on the fly and say, well, let's try this and let's try that. Of course, he doesn't know any of that. Um, but I know sort of the behind the scenes stuff.
Right.
so that's interesting. Speak to the experience then of doing the dungeon crawl type of play with Savage Worlds, because that's always a conversation that comes up periodically. And does it work well for that? What do do you change things, etc.?
It is well, and I'm kind of working through this part now in the sort of more detail. When you're playing with what I will say is that oftentimes I'm playing with like 1 to 3 people, other than myself. But so it's my son, a friend of his, and maybe my daughter. And so Savage Worlds scales very well. If I want to throw in, oh, you're going into the goblin lair and there's 21 goblins, 21 sets of eyeballs staring at you, um, they'll come out. I mean, they can go through all 21 and still come out. I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't going to be some serious danger, but it's definitely doesn't have the same level of danger as you would in a D20 game.
Well, depending
There's
on how the dice roll, right? I mean,
Yeah, I
exploding
mean
dice can.
and that's the fun part about Savage Worlds is how swingy the dice are.
Right.
I mean, you can, as you guys were commenting that I used I looked at my numbers against several different times I went through a simulator. And you're right. I mean, the simulator is all things being equal, or that particular time around. But it doesn't take into account somebody's actually thinking about the tactics, or the fact that I could, have a D4 -2 and just ace continually on my wild die, and end up, just battering somebody with, 24 points, or I mean, just totally, killing it. And that, I mean, that's really the excitement in Savage Worlds, um, because it can happen on either side.
Right.
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 It you think
You're
it would
just
favor.
as much a threat as you are.
Goblins can ace too.
risk.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I mean, they don't have as much chance because you're not necessarily giving them a wild die, but
Right.
but they can definitely be dangerous. I mean, and in several of the simulations I ran, one guy against 2 goblins won.
Yeah.
So it can happen, and I think there's a lot more excitement in it. I also play Dungeon Crawl Classics, which has a dice chain and can be very swingy in a sense because of that dice chain. When you're rolling, a D4 versus a D6, and so I mean, things can the pendulum can swing, in your favor or against you very quickly in that kind of a game. And for Savage Worlds, that unpredictability is just as much fun as the unpredictability of, am I going to go in and die in this dungeon because I rolled a 1 instead of a 20.
So Eric Lamoureux, your friend, our friend, asks, and this ties into exactly what you were just talking about. Are your kids picking up on the different combat tactics in Savage Worlds yet? Like defend, wild attack, aim, etc.
As I introduce them, he'll pick them up, but unless I remind him, he won't necessarily remember.
Right, common for new players. Yeah.
So
Totally
I mean,
common.
his mindset is not much different than any other new player. It's
Right.
quite interesting because you would think there's a huge age disparity between 30, 40 somethings and an 8 to 10-year-old, and I think that we tend to pick up rules and tactics at about the same rate. And especially somebody like him or somebody like me that is more of a tactile learner. I've got to see it modeled before I really understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until I played in my first Savage Worlds game that I understood the rules, and I still don't understand everything until I've used it.
Right.
Writing an adventure, is a great way because you kind of have to think about all of those things. It's still not as intense as if you had to use everything because you're looking at a limited menu. You're only looking to satisfy what it is that you've written in for your story.
Right. So we're at 10:22. So we got a little bit of time left. I still want to touch on a couple things with Savage Dungeons as well as talk about what future plans you might have. I guess for those who might not be familiar with Savage Dungeons, what does somebody get when they pick up Savage Dungeon, when they're looking at the work that you've done in that so far?
So far, it's just what I've got on the blog site is just sort of my notes, if you will. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They're the what I'm thinking or how I'm thinking about doing things, and in most cases, it's an open question to the community to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? So also some part of it is I'm putting it out there because I know there's been a lot of people who have done a lot of that work already, and I don't want to either step on anybody's toes or have to redo some work if I can use what they've already done.
Right.
So in some ways, it's a communication for me to be able to, one, keep track of things, but also to be able to say to other players, hey, what do you think about this? I got a lot more response on that last time I asked the question, than probably any of the other times, because everybody else, all the other times are, I love this. This is great. Keep going. And that's great. That's inspiring. I mean, that's why I'm doing it at this point, because if there weren't so many people interested in it, I probably would have just kept it to myself and hey, we're just gonna play off of whatever notes I remember to write down this week.
Right.
But being able to kind of like do it and see other people get excited about it is really cool. I mean, I'd love to turn the tables around and say, Ron, what do you love about it? I mean, I'm honestly just curious, like, what is it that excites you about it?
You're muted, Ron.
You're muted, Ron.
Sorry. I really, because my kid won't shut up. But
what kid does?
I know. So I'm finding a lot of the stuff that you're saying very interesting, Frank, because you're like, I also got into Dungeon World, which I got into a little bit, and you're like, I also play Dungeon Crawl Classics. I just ran a tournament funnel yesterday. So you and I kind of need to get together, I think. But
we can definitely do that because we're close enough that we can do that.
That's right. Yeah.
Where are you at?
I'm in Maricopa, and to most people in Phoenix, that's North Tucson.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm in East Tucson. So anyway, so that needs to. But what I was getting at though is that it's the whole old school feel that I'm into. That is exciting about Savage Dungeons. But I do like a lot of my modern mechanics, right? So the biggest thing for me is what I think your design goal is, and that is the feel. And you've kind of said that that's what you're looking for with your son. And so my major excitement is bringing that feel to Savage Worlds. It's not a nut that I have completely cracked myself in, my 13 years playing the game.
Yeah,
so
I think the closest we've had were Reality Blur's Old School Fantasy and Weird Dave Olson's more recent stuff, but it's more straight fantasy companion than anything.
Those are fine, but I think, and I'm not saying they missed the mark so much as I don't think they dug deep enough. That's what I'm really kind of excited about with Savage Dungeons is it was pretty clear to me on reading your posts on it so far that you're coming from kind of the same mental space that I would be coming from in this, so that's kind of exciting to me.
I may have an advantage to some folks in that, I spent almost 20 years out of gaming altogether, so there's a...
So your memories are clearer.
Yeah, well, I don't know about clearer, but they're not clouded by a lot of...
all the stuff in between.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right.
Your memory's not clouded by what happened in the 90s with gaming,
right.
Or the early 2000s. No, totally. And that's kind of where I'm coming from because I spent the 90s with a lot of these, what I would now call boutique games is wrong, but basically very specialized games, right? Like the original Deadlands and the World of Darkness stuff that came out in those years, and those sorts of things are kind of stuck in my brain space. So it is kind of cool to hear that you have been out of it for as long as you were, and now I really understand why you're coming from that area. Whereas me, I'm having to go back and play these older games or play these new homages like DCC to kind of get back to that feel. So
cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that because I mean that's definitely where I'm heading. And there are times when I worry that I'm being too specific, right? So when I think about the games that I played back in the 80s, a lot of it was driven by the books that I was reading, right? So you had a lot of young adult fiction of that time, and you had stuff that were like, gosh, I can't. My mind is failing me in terms of reference works, but it wasn't just Tolkien, right? It was stuff where you had a character.
For me, it was like the Chronicles of Prydain, like Black Cauldron,
yes,
Terran Wanderer, that kind of stuff. And Fritz Leiber's Longmarch stuff is huge influence on me when it comes to that type of gaming.
And that's exactly the niche that I'm looking at in terms of building this stuff. I don't remember. I mean, we had elves as characters, but it wasn't very heavy on on those sort of. It was still very human centric, right? I think I really enjoy Beyond the Wall. I think that they've really captured that feel for that. I haven't played it yet, but again, reading it,
it's a good read.
It definitely captures that feel. And I've drawn some inspiration from that as well, just in character design, because I think, wow, this is great. I can spend about 10 minutes and I don't have to walk in with a backstory.
That's actually kind of the nut I've been trying to crack recently with Savage Worlds. I've been trying to come up with a way to make a Savage Worlds character as easy as it would be to make a Dungeon World character.
Well, I'm hoping that that idea of the quick draw wild card will satisfy that.
Yeah, niche. I haven't messed with that yet. I want to try it.
And I'm not right now. I'm flying solo on this, and I'm more than happy to have anybody out there who wants to chime in and help out and stuff like that. But I mean, the biggest problem with asking for that kind of help is, I almost want to put the requirement on there that I need more than I'm going to need some commitment beyond just saying,
Right.
Hey, have you thought about this? Right.
Exactly.
You want partners, not
right.
Yeah.
I need somebody who's willing to say, yeah,
Ideas
I got a
are cheap.
great idea for the Magic User. Can I run with it?
Yeah. Very cool.
Right. So we are at the end of the hour, and I know I want to keep going for a little bit longer because we got some more questions, obviously.
Overtime.
And I really would love to keep just talking about Savage Dungeons the entire time, obviously. But you've got some other things that you're working on that are upcoming, and one of them is you mentioned earlier. It's sort of a collaboration piece. Tell us a little bit about that.
Are we talking about Snap Sites?
We are.
Okay.
Yes.
Shameless plug for the guys over at Just Insert Imagination. So Eric and I have been, I want to say, friends for a while now, and we've done some stuff. He helped me out with the Heart of Darkness, and he was one of the original sponsors for the Patreon and stuff like that. And so Eric really liked a map that I did of a bookstore, and when they were starting, when him and Mornay were putting together Snap Sites, one of the ideas he had was based on that bookstore, and he said, "Hey, would you mind putting together this a bookstore like that, but just different so that it's not the same?" Sure, no problem. So I was able to work with those guys, and I love collaborating with people. I feel like I do much better work when I'm working with somebody than if I'm running solo on anything, because frankly, I've got so much going on in a day. This thing up here doesn't always fire on all cylinders, and when it does, it's usually empty. So I love it when I've got people who message me and say, "Hey, what about this kind of map?" And I mean, the more detail you want to add, you may not get all of it, but it's definitely going to help me decide where I'm going to put what, and does furniture go in this room and stuff like that. So working with Eric on that project was really great. And then he just sent me a message again last week or the week before, and he said, "Hey, could you do a jetliner for us?" I'm like, "I could definitely do a jetliner for you guys." So they've got a new Snap site that's coming out, I think in the next week or so, that is going to be an airliner. I don't know any of the details for that, but I know that the map is going to look great.
Nice. Yeah, right.
Nice.
Wonder why you think that. No, that's fantastic. And it's true what you were saying too about like the more details you have, the more information you have as far as it's essentially like with a project where you have like requirements gathering, right? You know what needs you have to fulfill and so on, and that gives you the foundation on which to build and sort of the objectives you need to hit. So that's a great way to think about it. I think you're approaching that really well personally. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily just start spitting out things randomly, but I want to provide stuff that people want to use.
Right.
I don't want a bunch of supporters, people either buying my stuff just because it's the latest thing out from me, or people supporting me on Patreon and it just dings their account for $1 every month, and they never.
You don't want people randomly throwing money at you? What's wrong with you, man?
I don't mind that, but what keeps you going is the fact that people are like giving you feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So speaking of your Patreon, you do. So one, you have the free Monday maps that you do, and
it's either Monday or Friday. I was trying to do a Friday religiously, and life just kind of like falls on you. And I mean, when you're doing this as just more or less a hobby,
right?
I'm not raking in the thousands of dollars that some of these I mean, I see some of these guys that they're not even doing comics, they're just doing like one-off illustrations, and
right,
and they're getting $1,500 per creation. I'm like, how do I get that?
I'm doing something wrong with my life. Like, so yeah, so with that, so you have a Patreon campaign that you have going. And what's the URL for that? Just for those who are listening and aren't looking at show notes.
It is Patreon/Frank T.
That's easy to remember. All right. So patreon.com/Frank T.
Yep.
And what's the model that you're kind of going with as far as what patrons get and the different rewards and so on?
So I think I've got I think they start at 50 cents and go up to $5. I have one patron who's a $20 backer, and he's that guy that I don't mind not hearing from, but I never hear from him.
Oh.
But the card clears every month, so I'm kind of happy about that. But I'd rather have $21 guys than I mean, I'm not complaining, but in the grand scheme of things, if he decided, you know what, I'm not really using this stuff, or I don't want to back him anymore, then that's $20 in one chunk.
Right.
And
right.
So and at this point, I'm basically able to pay for my tools, which is really nice because my wife really likes that it's not coming out of our household bills.
That's always a good thing. Yeah. If your wife's happy,
yeah.
You're doing well. Yeah.
And the occasional Kickstarter that comes up from Pinnacle.
Because there aren't enough.
Although I can't complain because I had dinner with Shane and a bunch of other guys one night, and I was making fun of them about if I didn't have to pay for all these Kickstarters, and he says, well, it comes around, and he paid for dinner, so I can't complain too much.
So we all funded your dinner. That's awesome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Shane's good about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really great guy. I just hope I didn't embarrass myself too much that night.
I have to say, on the Rippers Kickstarter, I pledged what was for me an ungodly amount of money for Rippers, and I added all my add-ons on, and I still, with Backer Kit, I still had to pay 96 cents.
Oh, that's hilarious. Like, really?
I was like, what? And it's funny because I spent a lot of money, and what I was outraged about was 96 cents.
Nice. So going back
Kickstarter.
to your Patreon campaign, you do have some stuff that's exclusive to your patrons, which is really cool.
Yep.
Stuff that'll never see the light of day. That's really cool. A lot of your stuff, after maybe about a month or so, I think is what you said.
I'm
its way.
probably a little bit further behind than a month.
Hey, I don't think any patron's going to complain.
Yeah. And again, I asked before I started doing that, and saying, hey, do you guys have any problem with me putting these on DriveThruRPG or RPG Now or any other site after they're up here for a while, and I haven't had any complaints, so
yeah. And nobody's pulled their funding, so yeah.
Yes, and I think that some part of that is I want to be able to do that just because some people, for whatever reason, don't want to make that commitment, even if it's just $1 a month. For whatever reason, whether it's their finances, they're living, in
financial
such a way
situations change.
I can't deal with having this even $1 come out automatically.
Right.
I understand that. I do that all the time. So I want to be able to give people that opportunity to say, well, you can get it a la carte, right?
Right.
If you wanted to get this one, but you can't, you really don't want to support the whole thing for whatever reason, but hey, save up $3 and go buy it, here instead.
Right.
So.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, Christian,
I think we're at the end of the hour, or well over the hour.
I think you have some things to read, and perhaps the word Patreon may come up again.
That's right.
But first, Frank, thank you so much for taking the time, man. This has been awesome.
Thank you, guys. It's been a privilege.
Yeah.
And we definitely do need to get together and maybe, I don't know, do some spell burning.
Hey, you name the time and place, and I'll try and make it there.
Awesome.
That's cool. That's really cool. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. And, I forgot the spiel.
Go to savagebloggers.net and
Yeah,
check out all the ways you can send us money. No.
Be sure to visit our website, www.savagebloggers.net. And
right.
Also on that site, you'll find the aggregated SB and RSS feed. You'll also find podcast subscription links, YouTube channel links, and of course links to our Patreon page, which if you really do like what we're doing here and you want to show your support, especially if you want to help us with some Simply Savage editing, hint, hint, hit up our Patreon page and throw money at us. But most importantly of all, whatever you do until next time, keep it fast, furious, and fun. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Frank, for joining us. And
It's been great.
And to all, a good night.